one of the largest discussions I've seen in the Pokémon fandom is the discussion about the post-game content of the mainline Pokémon games. Which game has the most and best post-game content? Can we even call it a post-game when there's no Battle Frontier? And is it true that the 3DS games have far less post-game content than the previous ones? In this video I want to analyze and compare all there is to the post-game content of the mainline Pokémon games. See how it has changed over the years and regions, and from originals to remakes. Welcome to the post-game analysis. Part 0. Definitions. Now the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what exactly is post-game? Well, obviously it's everything that happens after the end of the game, signified by the credits. So it would seem like post-game content is everything you can do exclusively after the credits have rolled and you have become the champ of the Pokémon League. However, since nothing is that simple, we'll have to count some other things as well. For example, there's a lot of optional content, including long-term activities like filling the Pokédex, that is either introduced or teased during the main story. But since this is typically regarded and handled as post-game stuff, it will count as well. To simplify the process of listing and comparing every bit of post-game content between the games, I will only list things specific to each game or region, meaning the following activities, though still part of the individual post-game, will not be listed and will instead be handled as a given for each game. These are completing the Pokédex, battling online and with your friends, continued participation in gambling activities and other repeatable minigames, grinding to level 100, breeding and perfecting a Pokémon, catching shinies, one-off or daily battles against certain trainers like your rival or the Game Freak trainer, perfecting your trainer card. Everything else post-game will be counted and compared to first the third versions, then the remakes, and lastly every other game of the franchise. For catchable legendaries, I'll ignore mythicals as well as those that can only be caught through trading, like Rayquaza in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Additionally, it'll only count as one legendary if only one of them can appear in one playthrough. For example, Latias and Latios only count as one legendary in Emerald, since you can only ever catch one without an event. A post-game dungeon is defined as a closed-off area with wild Pokémon and/or trainer battles and/or puzzles. A post-game route is a uniquely named road on the overworld connecting two other places with tall grass and/or trainer battles. Post-game towns are defined as a settlement of a Pokémon Center with at least one more house, though there is one exception. Now, with everything properly defined, let us begin, obviously, with the Kanto region and the games for the Game Boy. Red, Green, Blue and Yellow. Part 1. Kanto. Humble Beginnings. Though the first ever post-game content might be considered quite meager from today's standpoint, it isn't all too shabby if you remember that these games were released on the Game Boy. And although its technical capabilities are much higher than what NASA had to bring people to the moon, data storage size was an issue, so it's kind of a miracle that we got any post-game at all, however small it ended up being. There is one single dungeon left to explore after the game's credits, Cerulean Cave, a 3-level dungeon with lots of rare Pokémon to catch, as well as the sole post-game legendary available in these games, Mewtwo. Like I said, it's not much, but I bet many people's minds were blown back in the day that there was still new stuff to see after the end of the game. A nice little detail I want to add is that this dungeon actually differs quite a lot between the different versions, with Red and Green, Blue and Yellow each having a completely different layout and variety of Pokémon to catch. The cave layout for the original Red and Green versions, only released in Japan, wasn't seen internationally until the release of the remakes, Fire Red and Leaf Green, which are the next games we'll cover. Obviously, being remakes, Cerulean Cave returns as a post-game dungeon, but that's just the beginning, since these games added quite a bit of content through the Sevii Islands. 7 islands of which 3 are visited during the main story, leaving the last 4 of them for post-game. So in addition to that first post-game dungeon, they added 6 more, as well as 4 cities and a whole lot of 12 additional routes to explore. This is simply an enormous amount of additional content after finishing this probably already well-known region. And as an incentive to travel through all these new areas, you are tasked to retrieve the Sapphire from the hands of a post-Giovanni Team Rocket to unlock trading with the Hoenn games. If that's not enough, there's also another legendary to catch, with one of the legendary beasts, depending on your chosen starter. Additionally, you can have a rematch with the Elite Four, whose teams have seen a massive overhaul. Lastly, there's the Trainer Tower on 7 Island, which is later reused as Trainer Hill in Pokémon Emeralds. In it, you have to defeat a number of trainers without automatic healing between battles, and if you win, you get one of 4 not too interesting items, but it's a fun challenge anyway. I mean, who really cares about prizes when taking part and having fun is already reward enough? All in all, these games have a fantastic post-game and add upon the original games in so many ways that they absolutely have to be considered the definitive versions of the Kanto experience. Wait, what's this? Oh right, I forgot about this game. So let's cover the post-game of the Let's Go games, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. With them also being remakes of the first generation games, this time yellow instead of red, blue and green, Cerulean Cave is back once again as a post-game dungeon, with Mewtwo waiting for you on the lowest level as a legendary to catch. In addition, for some reason, it appears that the legendary birds can spawn endlessly as rare mobs after you've already caught them, which is weird since that never happened before in Pokémon games, but whatever, these games are weird and I'm confused and want to go home. These games also add the so-called Master Trainers, which are trainers specializing in each of the 153 available Pokémon in this game. You mostly have to beat every one of them in a one-on-one battle with the exact same Pokémon they have, meaning the Caterpie trainer has to be defeated with a Soul Caterpie of yours. Other than that and stronger Elite Four rematches, this game doesn't have other post-game content for us to track, so the only thing left to do here is to loudly proclaim Fire Red and Leaf Green as the best Kanto games ever and move on to the second Pokémon region and our second set of games. Part 2. Johto. And Kanto? Now, the Johto games are quite problematic for this video, since theoretically the whole explorable Kanto region counts as post-game content. If you wonder why I might have a problem with that, please watch my video, The Second Region Problem, for a more in-depth analysis. But contrary to what I said there, I'll just accept that Kanto counts as post-game content for Gold and Silver, though out of protest, I will not look up for exactly how many towns, routes and dungeons this should count. You can do it yourself if you want to and write the answer in the comments. I'd be very interested in hearing it, but don't forget, Gold and Silver didn't actually bring back Viridian Forest, so it doesn't count as a dungeon. Moving on. Another thing that counts as postgame for Gold and Silver is the opposite cover legendary of Ho or Lugia, which you can only catch after receiving either the Rainbow or the Silver Wing from the Old Man in Pewter City. Lastly, there's the SS Aqua, which, given our definitions for dungeons, qualifies as one, being reminiscent of the SSN in Kanto. And that's it for Gold and Silver. The first third version, Pokémon Yellow, didn't have any additional post-game content that counts, but that changes for Pokémon Crystal, since it introduces the Battle Tower, the first one of the series. And although you can actually enter it before defeating the Elite Four, it counts, since beating all levels of this tower is actually really hard, despite allowing all legendary and mythical Pokémon to be used. It must have been a lot of fun at the time, and I'm kind of jealous of all the kids that got to experience the third versions back in the day. I had to amuse myself nearly 4 years just with Pokémon Pearl, and I liked it and had fun and never once complained about it. Stupid rich kids. Anyway, Crystal was great, and you get to once again catch Lugia and Ho-Oh in post-game. This time both of them. The last thing to cover for Johto are the remakes, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. If you've ever read a discussion about people's favorite games, these two always come up, especially because of all the post-game content that's included in them. Because in addition to the Kanto region, this one also brings back the Battle Frontier with 5 unique battling facilities. It's basically a direct copy from Platinum, so I'll explain what it is in more detail later. Suffice it to say that the Battle Frontier brings with it a vast amount of content and challenge and makes a lot of people very happy. But of course that's not all, since in addition to actually recreating the Kanto region without cuts this time, looking at you Viridian Forest and Cerulean Cave, they also added a Safari Zone, which was conspicuously missing from Gold and Silver. And this Safari Zone is quite special, because even though you get access to it during the main game, its functionality is expanded after becoming Champ, giving you easier access to non-Kanto or Johto Pokémon, which is great. Stronger Elite Four rematches are also in, and in addition to either Lugia or Ho-Oh, you can catch 6 more legendaries. And as a last note, although it doesn't count, I just have to mention the Pokéathlon, which is a really cute minigame collection that's unique to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and I imagine many people had a lot of fun with it, even after playing through the game and post-game content. So in conclusion, although Johto itself is kind of lacking in post-game activities, the fact that all Johto games include the Kanto region really makes up for it, although I'm still not convinced that this justifies the Johto region being so small. They even had to add routes to the east of Cyanwood City to have a place to put the Safari Zone at, and even despite that the region is not even nearly close enough. Part 3. Hoenn, A New Frontier. Ruby and Sapphire were in many ways a fresh start for the Pokémon franchise, not least because of the massive technical jump from the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance. So instead of a game featuring multiple regions, we're now back at just having one, which therefore has to bring its own postgame to the table. And Ruby and Sapphire kind of lack in this regard. After becoming champ, you can catch 2 new legendaries, first Latias or Latios, only one depending on your version, and second Rayquaza, which you can find at the top of Sky Pillar, one of 2 post-game dungeons, the other being the ship SS Tidal, which has a lot of trainers on board. It's certainly more content than what Red and Blue offered, but little compared to later games. Not all of them, but most. In addition to all that, you have the second iteration of the Battle Tower, which prohibits legendary and mythical Pokémon this time and is now exclusively accessible in post-game. Lastly, even though they might not specifically count as post-game content, are the Pokémon contests, which serve as an alternative to battling and present you with the challenge of reaching Master Rank in each of the 5 categories, which is quite difficult in my experience, but fun nonetheless. And that's it for Ruby and Sapphire. Solid post-game for the time, but definitely beaten by the still very beloved third version of Emerald. In addition to Rayquaza and Latias and Latios, where you can now choose which of the 2 you want to encounter, Emerald also lets you catch both Kyogre and Groudon in post-game, bringing the number of post-game legendaries up to 4. If you don't remember, the Regis are actually catchable before the Elite Four, like most region-native trios. And just like in Ruby and Sapphire, you have the 2 dungeons Sky Pillar and SS Tidal to fight through as well. The big differences start with the addition of Trainer Hill, which is located north of Mauville City, meaning you can participate as soon as you reach it, with all Pokémon being scaled to your level. Otherwise, it's an exact recreation of the Trainer Tower from Fire Red and Leaf Green. They just changed the rewards to be more interesting. The last and biggest addition to post-game is the Battle Frontier, which replaces Ruby and Sapphire's single battle tower with a large island filled with 7 different battling facilities, each of them featuring a unique set of rules and gimmicks. And since it's very hard to win everywhere with the same team of Pokémon, this is a fantastic place to spend, or waste, lots of time, even after finishing the main story. To encourage getting better at all facilities, each of them feature a Frontier Brain, a very strong trainer who is in charge of the facility. If you win against them, you are rewarded with different symbols, each coming in a silver and golden variety, meaning there's a lot to do here and only the most devoted players will have collected all 7 symbols. And luckily they brought the whole Battle Frontier back for the remakes, the 3DS games Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. They just changed its name to Battle Resort and got rid of all 7 facilities and replaced them with an exact copy of the Battle Maison from X and Y. Yeah, sadly the remakes for Ruby and Sapphire left out the Battle Frontier completely, but that doesn't mean there's no post-game content in these games, right? Let's take a closer look. First, as with most modern Pokémon games, you can re-battle the Elite Four, and in addition to having a stronger and larger team, they also use Mega Evolution, which is really cool. And once again, the SS Tidal counts as a post-game dungeon. Sky Pillar counts too, but it's now part of the so-called Delta episode, which introduces us to how Game Freak recently handled their post-games. Instead of having no singular story thread at all, or sending us on a very loose quest throughout the region, from X and Y forwards the focus seems to have shifted to story-centered post-game episodes, each 1 to 2 hours long, with the Delta episode being the one for this game. In it, we meet new characters, have a few interesting fights, a lot of dialogue, but only get to explore new places at the end of this quest. Once again, it leads us to Sky Pillar, the second post-game dungeon, where we catch our first post-game legendary with Rayquaza, which we need to get to space to save the world or something. In space we meet, fight and catch Deoxys, making this the first mythical Pokémon encounter in a mainland Pokémon game without some kind of event item distribution. And speaking of legendaries, this game has a whole lot of them available in post-game, so many that I won't even bother counting them all. To really get them all, however, you need to heavily trade with the other version of this game, so we can't catch quite as many legendary Pokémon as in a certain other game I'll cover later. Lastly, let's go back to the Battle Resort, which I would kinda count as a post-game city. People's hatred of it really overshadows more nuanced opinions about this place, because yeah, obviously this island is worse than the Battle Frontier, and the monument to it sucks, but it's a really cool place that makes a lot of stuff really easy. Like, it features a second daycare and a really easy way to hatch eggs, with you only having to hold down one button. It's great. Also, you got some interesting trainers to fight here, the obligatory Looker cameo, the aforementioned Battle Maison, which is better than nothing, and simply a completely new place to explore and see, which is always great in remakes. But in the end, it always comes down to the Battle Frontier for most people, making Emerald the undisputed winner for the Hoenn games, even with its outdated gameplay mechanics. Part 4, Sinnoh, slowly zoning in. With the Sinnoh games comes a change in console, and with the Nintendo DS, the ability to go online for the first time. And say what you want, but online battles are a huge part of many people's post-game enjoyment, and even though it might not necessarily be classified as content, and they might not be for everybody, I just had to mention them and the GTS, which made completing the Pokédex much easier and fun. When it comes to post-game content, I feel like Diamond and Pearl always get overshadowed by Platinum, which is understandable, but kinda undeserved I think, because when it comes to new areas, the two games are almost identical. In addition to the second half of Victory Road and Route 224 to the east of it, you know, the one with the Shaman event, there's a whole island, creatively named Battle Zone, to explore in post-game. And despite it being further north than this already cold and snowy region, it features a tropical landscape, a volcano and even a desert, which all add some needed diversity to the Sinnoh region. In numbers, that means there are 8 new routes and 3 towns to explore in post-game, which is quite a lot I think, only really beaten by the last 4 Sevi Islands. I'll ignore Kanto from Gold and Silver for this, since we were already familiar with it, so it wasn't really new. We also get 3 dungeons to explore in addition to the second half of Victory Road, and get to catch 3 legendaries with Giratina, Cresselia and Heatran. Regigigas is available only to those with all 3 other Regis, which can easily be ported over from a Gen 3 game through Pow Park, which only opens after getting the National Dex. Lastly, there's the standard Battle Tower in Battle Park, which features our rival's father, Palmer, as the Tower Tycoon, maybe this game's frontier brain. Though the Battle Tower is still the only facility in Diamond and Pearl, and you don't get any symbols or anything from winning against Palmer. And that's all for Diamond and Pearl's post-game. Quite alright I'd say. Though of course, coming from Emerald, and with both Platinum and Heart Gold and Soul Silver being the next games, it makes sense that Diamond and Pearl would get kinda lost between them. However, I'd say that Platinum wouldn't be nearly as great if it wasn't for these 2 games giving it a head start. But how does Platinum's post-game look like? Let's analyze. Just like Diamond and Pearl, Platinum has 8 routes, 3 towns and 3.5 dungeons for you to explore in post-game. This time however, the Battle Zone looks way more tropical and different from the rest of Sinnoh, which is really nice. In addition to Heatran and Cresselia, you can now also catch both Dialga and Palkia, as well as the bird trio Articuno, Zapdos and Moltres as roaming Pokémon, bringing the number of post-game legendaries up to 7. You can also battle against a stronger Elite 4 and even have your own villa in the resort area to live in, I guess. You can buy expensive furniture for it, which is a great money sink, especially since gambling is out in the Western versions, and get NPCs like the gym leaders to visit and talk to you. I'd love to see something like this, or the secret bases again in the future. Lastly, of course, there's a new Battle Frontier, which was later copy-pasted to the Johto region for Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This time there's 5 facilities, with the Battle Tower from Diamond and Pearl being one of them. Palmer got upgraded to Frontier Brain, and each facility got their own ones, each of them rewarding you with either Silver or Gold Prince, the replacement for symbols. Once again, you can battle to your heart's content under different rule sets and earn battle points to buy lots of stuff with. And that's it for Platinum. As I said, not that different to Diamond and Pearl when you ignore the Battle Frontier. And despite the Battle Frontier only having 5 instead of 7 different facilities, I kind of like this one a bit more, since you can use all Gen 4 Pokémon, as well as battle with the physical special split and other updated mechanics. If only the 4th generation wasn't so slow, well, it's nothing a remake can't fix. Hopefully it'll include all the Platinum features this time. It won't. I won't even pretend to believe that Game Freak would do that. Honestly, I'd already be happy if we got an actual remake, instead of a Let's Go Sinnoh game. Please, dear Arceus, beware us from this terrible fate. Part 5. Unova. Circling towards greatness. Pokémon Black and White continued the streak of large areas of the map being left to post-game. but where in Sinnoh that new land was on an island, this time the whole eastern section of the Unovan Circle was post-game, leaving a lot of places for you to visit. And since you could only encounter newly introduced 5th gen Pokémon during the main game, these areas were also suddenly inhabited by older Pokémon as well, making them feel quite different than the main game, I think. So you have 6 additional routes, as well as the Marvelous Bridge, 3 cities and 7 dungeons to explore, which is simply a huge amount of content already. In addition to that, you haven't even defeated the champ of Unova, Order, yet, so you got an additional incentive to rebattle the Elite Four's stronger teams. As for legendaries, this time only one counts for post-game, Kyurem, with all other Unova legendaries being available earlier or requiring trade between 2 versions. As for cities, there's also the White Forest and the Black City, which are version-exclusive areas that do count as a 4th post-game city, but I wanted to discuss them separately. Through multiplayer, you could bring more and more people into these areas, making them more useful and change visually. In White Forest, new residents brought new Pokémon with them you can encounter in the city's tall grass, and they could give you rare items. While in the Black City, you can battle different residents, and each of them made a rare item available in the shop. It's a neat idea, I think, but really only works if you have a friend with the game and you two regularly play together. Saying that, there are a whole lot of other multiplayer features in Black and White and the Gen 4 games as well, but since I haven't been able to play any of them, because I don't like my friends enough to play with them, and with some of them outright not working anymore due to the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection being offline, I can't really say anything about them or factor them into this analysis. They wouldn't count anyway, since you could do them before post-game, I think. Moving on, there's the Battle Subway, which is this version's idea of the Battle Tower. Quite fitting if you remember that the Unova region is based off of New York City. Instead of Frontier Brains, this time you have the 2 subway bosses, Ingo and Ahmed, challenging you after a certain number of wins. As always, it's not comparable to an actual Battle Frontier though. And last but not least, kinda least since it's not that exciting, is the post-game story quest with Looker, who tasks you to find the 6 sages of Team Plasma, who are all hidden throughout Unova. It's not terribly deep or anything, but nicely leads you to the unexplored areas of the map, which I guess was a good way to encourage this. And that's it. Quite a lot of stuff to do, I'd say, but of course most of it is non-repeatable content, which people seem to like far less than the long-term stuff. And I get that, because what good do the 7 post-game dungeons do after I've went through them? It's certainly nothing that keeps bringing me back to the game for weeks after finishing it, like the Battle Frontiers do, but luckily Game Freak kinda has an answer for that. The sequels Pokémon Black 2 and White 2. Let's again start with the non-repeatable content, which is interesting, because since these games are sequels and mostly play in the same places as the first games, many post-game areas aren't actually new. Most of the newly designed towns and dungeons are visited during the main game, leaving the post-game with mostly unneeded places that were already visited in the first games. Still, some things have changed, and no matter if you've been there before in another game, you haven't in this one. So let's get going. First up are 7 additional routes, as well as an array of bridges to explore. Then there's 4 cities, as well as our first character's home of New Vima Town, which doesn't count as a city since there's no Pokémon Center there. There's 8 dungeons to explore, as well as the nature preserve where you can catch a shiny Haxorus. Lastly, there's 10 legendary Pokémon to catch, with the Lake Guardians, Latios or Latios depending on your version, Regice or Registeel depending on your version, Zekrom or Reshiram depending on your version, Regirock, Cresselia, Heatran, as well as Kyurem. The Regis are interesting because through the newly introduced key system you can unlock all their chambers in all games by connecting the 2 game versions. Speaking of the key system, after becoming champ you unlock the easy or challenge mode, making the game either easier or harder. Because where else would a game designer put the option for an easy mode if not at the literal end of only one version of 2 games? Brilliant! At least there were difficulty options back then. Anyway, just like in the first games, you can fight against the stronger Elite Four. This time, however, you've already beaten the new champ, Iris. The Battle Subway is back unchanged, although some of the rewards are different, and there is still no Battle Frontier. There's kind of a replacement though, at least people always mention it like it is one, and it's called the Pokémon World Tournament. You unlock it during the story segments around Driftvale City, but the real meat is only available during post-game. Pretty much every important character from the Pokémon mainline games comes back and can be battled here in tournament style, meaning you can rematch Red or all the Hoenn gym leaders with overhauled teams, which is surprisingly fun. Especially because they've actually remixed all the music from the games, which is absolutely amazing. The only thing really missing are the other region's Elite Four members and their respective music remixes, but that's really the only thing I can criticize the World Tournament for. It's really fun and great fan service for every generation. Also, I'd like to mention PokéStar Studios, which isn't really a post-game activity, but still something to spend a lot of time in, and I bet most people didn't do much here until after the story. Moving on, there is an achievement system in the game, in the form of medals you can collect from Mr. Medal. There's 255 of them, and you get them for doing basically everything, from reading signs to fishing. What's great are the challenge medals, tasking you to finish the Pokémon League with only type-themed teams, or even just a single Pokémon. Only the most dedicated people got every single medal, I bet, but I always found it fun to just do stuff I enjoyed and be rewarded for it. They should really bring them back. Now, the last thing I want to talk about are the White Forest and the Black City, because they've changed quite a bit. First, thanks to the key system, you can have either of them in each version, which is quite nice. But you can no longer encounter wild Pokémon in White Forest or fight trainers in Black City, making them way less different than before. Thankfully, the population isn't controlled through multiplayer features anymore, but through the two dungeons, White Tree Hollow or Black Tower. These are basically randomly generated dungeons with lots of strong trainers for you to battle, with a steady progression through ever larger areas. In the final area you fight Benga, the grandson of former champ Alder, and if you beat him, you can receive a shiny Dratini or Gible, depending on your version. These dungeons are absolutely amazing in my opinion, because they provide an easy way to level up in post-game, and are something I absolutely want to see in every Pokémon game. A massive randomly generated dungeon with increasing difficulty that provides never-ending challenges and gameplay. This for some reason is so much more appealing to me than the regular Battle Tower style battles, probably because here you don't just battle, but also have to traverse an area and have to watch your team's health, since you aren't healed after every battle. It's remarkable to me how much fun can be generated out of such an, I presume, easily put together and programmed feature. I mean, even Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals had something like this back on the Super NES, which was even more remarkable at the time. So please Game Freak, bring this back. Please. Anyway, that's it for the Unova games. Incredible post-game content if you ask me, but since it doesn't have a Battle Frontier, it's hard to argue that these games are the best of the best. But to me, Black 2 and White 2 in particular are the highlights of the franchise when it comes to post-game, and I can't wait to see them reimagined in a couple of years, with fully fledged remakes. Please Arceus, don't mess this up for me. I don't have anything else in life. Part 6. Kalos. Oh right, I forgot about this. Oh boy, where do I even begin? It's always amusing and kind of shocking to me how little there actually is in terms of post-game content for Kalos. Like, don't get me wrong, I really like X and Y in the Kalos region, and while playing through it, I always feel like this is one of the biggest regions, with so many routes to travel through and towns to visit. But all of that just instantly stops once you reach post-game, since there's literally only one sad little city to explore after finishing the story. Sure, the city looks nice and all, but especially coming from Unova, where you literally hadn't seen 1/3 of the region after beating the game, this was incredibly disappointing. Luckily, there's at least a little bit more to post-game than just this one city. First off, the legendaries. You can catch 3 legends per game, one of the 3 birds, Mewtwo, as well as Zygarde. Also, you can search the region for the last couple of Mega Stones, which for some reason aren't available during the main story. This was always one of my biggest complaints about X and Y. Why introduce the feature of Mega Evolution, but then have like a dozen of them be locked in post-game? Say I want to use a Mawile, because I've seen the promo shots of Mega Mawile and love the addition of Fairy type. Why make it so that I can't even Mega Evolve Mawile while playing through the regular game without cheats? This is absolute nonsense. It doesn't help that the hunt for Megastones in post-game is absolutely terrible too. You can only get them between 8 and 9 PM, and you'd have to scour the whole damn region for them, which is just really frustrating busy work and no fun at all. What was fun are the online options of X and Y, and one of those is especially interesting, at least to me, the Friend Safari. For every friend registered on your 3DS, you got access to their individual Friend Safaris, where you could catch not just rare Pokémon, but they were also guaranteed at least 2 perfect IVs and have a much higher shiny rate. And even though it's just a very simple feature, and by no means comes close to recent Safari zones, this is a really cool idea and was the first thing in the world to make me wish for more than one friend. And just like the Friend Safari, there's another important facility in the Seoul post-game city, the Battle Maison, which is just the usual copy of a trainer tower. The special characters this time are 4 color-coded sisters, who are like really bland and forgettable, and I already forgot who I was talking about. And now for the last bit of post-game content, which I always forget about for some reason, even though it's basically my favorite part of X and Y, the Looker quest. After Black and White started dabbling in this direction, this can be seen as the actual start of the recent trend of post-game being mostly centered around one particular story, just like the Delta episode of Auras. This time, as well as in Sun and Moon, Looker is prominently featured. He started a detective agency in Lumiose City, and he wishes our character to help him out. His secret goal is to find Zerosic, a Team Flare dude who is important or something I don't really remember and I don't care, because the real star of the story is, or rather are, Emma, a homeless girl that helps us in our investigations and is allowed to live in the detective agency from now on, and her Isper Mimi. Throughout the course of the story, we revisit Lysandro Labs and get to battle through a new floor there, but it basically just completely reuses the layout from before, so I chose not to have it count as a post-game dungeon. All in all, it's a really well made and told story that even made for a great Pokémon Generations episode. It's free on YouTube and you should watch it if you haven't seen it. And this ends the region with the most disappointing post-game for most people. As we've seen, it certainly has more to offer than the original Kanto or Hoenn games, but is pretty much beaten by everything else. Luckily, we've only had to wait 2 years, because after Auras, we finally got to see the Kalos region as it should have been from the beginning, in the still famously amazing Pokémon Z. At least, it would have been, because Pokémon Z never came to pass. So we can only imagine what parallel worlds that actually got a third version for the Kalos games must look like right now. There must be better places. Part 7. Alola. Paradise Lost. After X and Y, Sun and Moon also received a lot of criticism for their alleged lack of post-game, which in my mind doesn't make sense in the slightest and only negatively taints the 3DS games as lackluster in every regard. Well, now we have the hard numbers to prove these people wrong and show them that actually Sun and Moon have mediocre and not terrible post-game. I mean, they're pretty good in that regard, way better than X and Y certainly. Let's start with the post-game routes. All of Eastern Pony Island is locked until post-game, meaning you get 5 additional routes to explore after finishing the main story, which is an acceptable number. In addition, you also get one dungeon, Resolution Cave. And say what you will about the level design of the Alola region, these 6 places are weirdly different from the rest of it. All the routes have way more interesting designs than any during the main story, with Pony Plains being one of the most open areas of any Pokémon mainline game. And despite Sun and Moon only having one real dungeon with the vast Pony Canyon, Resolution Cave comes very close to being an acceptable second one, way closer than the original Mount Lanakila. It makes me wonder what exactly was the idea behind making these post-game areas so much more interesting than anything else. I mean, just look at Pony Meadow and how much more three-dimensional the level design is here compared to the rest of the Alola region. These places really give me confidence and hope that the next Pokémon games could have really great level and dungeon design as well, despite no longer being restricted to a grid like every other game before. Anyway, these routes lead us to the Battle Tree, which is this version's version of the Battle Tower. What's interesting here is that there are a couple of returning important characters from older games that appear every 10 battles, like Cynthia or Grimsley. It's nowhere near enough to be comparable to the Pokémon World Tournament though, but it's still really nice to have. There's also a second battling facility in Alola, the Battle Royale, which has nothing to do with Fortnite or whatever else people play these days. It's once again a facility that you can actually fight in way before post-game, but that hasn't stopped us from counting it before, so it won't now. Close to the Battle Royale Dome is the Thrifty Mega Mart, which is where we meet Kagetora, who tasks us to travel the Alola region and find the EV evolution trainers he always wanted to beat. It's a short and not too involved side quest, but its writing is once again on point, and the reward, the Z Crystal for Eevee, is nice as well. Although it would have been much better to have that one available during the main story, but whatever, you haven't learned from the Mega Stones, and I bet you never will, Game Freak. Anyway, after this side quest, there's the Elite Four rematches. With you actually taking the place of a champ for the first time in the series history, you now actually have to defend your title as such, meaning there's a list of 10 potential challenges to your title, making the last battle kinda different every time you do the Pokémon League in post-game. It's a great idea and really fun to see which characters they chose, but sadly only Kukui has a full team of 6 Pokémon, which I think they should have given to each challenger. But of course that's not all for post-game, since there's another new story introduced featuring Looker once again. This time he teams up with Annabelle, one of the frontier brains of Emerald's Battle Frontier, and they task you to help them with the Ultra Beasts, who have been brought into the regular world. You're tasked to either defeat or catch them to keep the Alola region safe. I have to say, even though I enjoyed the story and liked that characters like Nanu or Mina, who didn't have as much to do during the main story, appeared again, I don't enjoy it as much as the Looker episode from X and Y, or even the Delta episode. I like the implications and nuances this story about Ultra Beasts and Parallel Worlds has, but in the end the characters aren't nearly as engaging as the ones from X and Y, and the story never gets as insane and hilarious as the Delta episode got near its end. I have to say that I do love the Ultra Beasts though, which finally leads me to the catchable legendaries in Sun and Moon's postgame. During this mission you will catch 5 different Ultra Beasts, 2 of which differ between the versions. In addition, you have the Guardian deities, except for Tapu Koko, which you battle and catch before the credits. Then there's Necrozma, the mysterious UB which gets a lot of focus in the Ultra games, and Cosmog, which you can get at either the Lake of the Sun or the Lake of the Moon, depending on your version. And lastly, there's Type Null, which Gladion hands you in Ether Paradise, in addition to the approximately 7 billion different discs for Silvally, which always unnecessarily clutter up my inventory and I hate them. This brings the number of postgame legendaries up to 11, which is a lot, but understandable given just how many legendaries the 7th generation introduced. And that's it for Sun and Moon. Like I said, apparently not enough to satisfy people, but in my opinion a solid post-game, that only got improved with the Ultra versions released 1 year later. Kinda. Because the Looker and Annabelle storyline got cut. Their appearance in these games is just reduced to one scene on Pony Plains, which is kind of sad, because I would have loved to see a rewritten story about researching the Ultra Beasts in their home worlds or something, because thanks to the new Ultra Warp Ride feature, we can actually go to their worlds and battle and catch as many UBs as we want. It's really fun to see these places, but since you can actually do this before becoming champ, it doesn't count towards postgame content. What does count is the rematch against the Elite Four and the battles against the 10 challengers, some of which are different now, but most of them still only have 5 Pokémon. I mean, what's wrong with them? Don't they want to win or something? Get out of here with your pathetic excuse for a final battle, you fools, and stop bothering us actual trainers with your stupidity. As for legendaries, this game continues the trend started in Oris, which gave you the ability to basically catch every single legendary Pokémon in existence. Again, I won't count them all, but I'll list the ones found outside the wormhole mechanic, which are again the 3 Guardian deities other than Tapu Koko, Cosmog, Type Null, and the version exclusive newly introduced Ultra Beast of Blacephalon or Stakataka. Lastly, Zygarde now resides in Resolution Cave, which makes sense since the lower area was already modeled after its chamber in Kalos, and they removed the side quest of hunting for its cells. Again returning are the Battle Tree and the Battle Royale, but in addition to those you now have the Battle Agency and the Festival Plaza, which is kinda similar to the Battle Factory of post-Battle Frontiers, just with an added online gimmick and without the option of taking your opponent's Pokémon after defeating them. But even despite all that, I had a great time playing with it, and the reward of a lot of festival coins was also great, since it provided you with a much easier way to grind for these things without a global festival going on. But it's certainly no substitute for an actual Battle Frontier, but few things are. I had fun with it and you can't stop me. An interesting thing I noticed was that the small side quest you had with the trial captains after winning against the island's Kahuna in Sun and Moon was moved to postgame for the Ultra versions for some reason. So Elima's, Lana's, and depending on your version either Kiawe's or Mallow's side quest are now considered postgame content too. And even though I won't mention them again, all the postgame routes and dungeons, as well as the Eevee side quests, are all present in the Ultra versions as well. The last piece of postgame content for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is the Rainbow Rocket episode, which is the complete replacement of the Looker stuff from Sun and Moon. It's a great and really fun quest that leads you through the transformed mansion from Lusamine on Ether Paradise, which definitely counts as a postgame dungeon. You have some great moments with Lily and Guzma and get to see all previous evil team leaders again and fight them. It's really fun, has great music and has to be my favorite one of the postgame episodes as a whole and concludes one of my absolute favorite Pokémon games. Although I kinda consider them all my favorite to be honest. Anyway, that was Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon's postgame content, and I have to say it's an improvement over Sun and Moon, and an even bigger one to X and Y or Oris. But sadly it hasn't satisfied many core Pokémon fans, although it might have been the closest one since the omission of the Battle Frontier. As for the 3DS games, it definitely reigns supreme, even if the online options aren't as easy and fun to use as the Gen 6 ones. Can't have everything with the Pokémon franchise apparently, can't have everything. Teil 8, das Fazit, die Dominanz des DS. It would be dishonest to ignore the fact that the Nintendo DS games after Diamond and Pearl are simply the height of what Pokemon's post-games have got to offer, in addition to Gold and Silver of course. But is it really that easy to choose a definitive winner? After spending way too long researching every bit of post-game content and an even longer amount of time telling you about it, I have to say that it's hard to just pick one game and say it has the best and most post-game content, since they're all so different. And considering the gameplay differences, making games like Emerald feel less interesting nowadays because of so many outdated game mechanics and comparably small roster of Pokémon, it's even harder to see one definite winner. But when it comes to content that engages you long term and really has you invest a lot of time in the game, I have to say that Platinum or Heart Gold and Soul Silver are the winners for me, simply because of their Battle Frontier. As for post-game content that's not repeatable, I chose Black 2 and White 2, which have a lot of single-player content hidden within them, in addition to their already meaty main story. Once again, Heart Gold and Soul Silver are close to the top though, and I can understand everyone who disagrees with me here, since in both games you just revisit already known places instead of traveling through new ones, like in Sinnoh or the first Unova games. And if you do disagree with me, then please let me know which game you think has the best post-game content. I can totally see people championing Fire Red and Leaf Green, or even the original Black and White games, though I guess most people fall into the usual trifalls of Emerald, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Black 2 and White 2. What's most interesting though is what the post-game content of the upcoming Nintendo Switch games and generations is going to look like. I'm certainly excited to see it, and I hope so are you, because in the end, even if the game has post-game content or not, it's still Pokémon, and we're all going to be very excited about it. Maybe too excited, maybe a little disappointed, but always hopeful. Thanks for watching. If you want more ludicrously stupid content like this video, please subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, remember to brush your teeth and take care. Bye!